yesterday with the presence of some of our brothers who are in leadership positions around the world, like Brother David Coffey and John Upton and others, that we were able to take some steps and meet with some people who can help us with this issue.
وفي بوادر حلوة من شقة خلينا نقول الحكومي ومن شقة إخوتنا اللي بيدعمونا في هذا الأمر.
And there are some very good positive signs from the side of from the government side and from the side of those brothers who are supporting us.
بس زي ما سمعنا الصبح في شيء يعني اللي بحرك كل هذه الأمور هو الإيمان.
But as we heard this morning, that there's something that supports all of this and works from behind it. It is faith.
لأنه مش عارفين بالضبط شو رد الفعل راح يكون.
And because we don't know for clear what the response of the government is going to be.
لكن إحنا بنآمن إنه الخطوة هاي راح تنجح إن شاء الله في صلوات وفي تغيير القلوب. الرب قادر يغير الأفكار وقادر يغير القوانين. كان بالحري قانون صغير مثل هذا.
But we believe that the Lord will give us that favor and that the door will be open from the official side, and because God is able, this is a small matter for Him, and He is able to give us this, which is rather a small factor.
واضح إنه محتاجين لدعم إخوتنا في الكنائس وفي الدول خصوصا في الولايات المتحدة وأوروبا.
It is clear and evident that we do need the encouragement and the support of our brothers in the churches in the West and in Europe.
وأنا بدي أوجه هذه يعني الطلب هذا إنه تأخذوا هذا الموضوع بعين الاعتبار حتى لما تتركوا من هون ما تنسوا.
I take this opportunity to bring it forth to you as a request that when you leave this conference, that you would not forget this issue.
احنا رح نتواصل مع احبائنا ورح نوصل لهم كل المعلومات اللي محتاجين لها وبالتالي ان راح يتابعوا معنا ويدعمونا ويبعثوا لنا الدعم اللازم.
And we are going to continue with our communication with our brothers in the churches, and we are working together on this so that we will be able together to achieve this goal.
Thank you, Wanda. And it's good to have an example of how partnership can work, that you have international leaders of the stature of David and John here available to make a contribution to the discussion, because I think the discussion, the dialogue between countries and cultures can be very significant. I saw Zahed's hand a moment ago, so I'm going to call him, and then Zahar, are you going to change the subject to something else? Okay, well, we'll go to Zahar, then come back to where's the mic? Have you got the mic? No, over here first, please, to Zahar, and then we'll come back down this direction.
Question for Shukri, Brother Shukri. Hope it's not a hard one. But the best example for partnership was the BCI or IMB partnership with the local Baptists. Now, we got the impression in the 90s that the IMB withdrew all the partnership with the local Baptists. Could you explain more what's the partnership now?
Okay.
My problem is still in the 90s. I don't know what's happening now. So it'd be good to give an idea what kind of partnership is happening, and especially in Israel, that will be more helpful.
Right, we'll come to that in a moment, but I want to just give the opportunity to our brothers at the front, if they wanted to comment on that debate about the recognition.
I would like just to speak about the same thing, being a chairman for the Palestinian Council, Evangelical Church there. It's the same thing. We are moving in the last year or so to be recognized by the Palestinian government as an evangelical body church there, that we have the same rights like any other church has. The same thing, نفس الشيء احنا عم نحاول نعمل في فلسطين عن هذا الأمور. So we need your prayer, And we are working on it. We have a committee, and we have been working on it. And we do have difficulties, but we try to reach to Mahmoud Abbas and to Fayyad, but with the partnership between Hamas and Fatah and all these things that we might have a new parliament and all of these things and election. But we are praying that God will be able to help us to be recognized as an evangelical council for the Palestinian churches in Palestine. And there we are, as a council, have all denominations, not just the Baptist. It's every group there because we are minority among minority. So thank you for praying for this, and if we need help, I know who to reach.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Cesar,
Well, I'm not a statistician, and I don't like statistics and figures, but I'm so happy to be in such a hall where everybody around me is a good evangelical or Baptist Christian. But the moment I leave this door, I'm again like a drop of water in a Muslim or Jewish ocean. And that's what worries me. I don't want to be eaten up. I don't want to be finished. And I think that you are having to face the same problem in the West. I read somewhere that the second largest religion in England is Islam. And I'm reading about the growth of Islam all through Europe, the States, and every place. And I have received recently a video sent to me by an American friend of a speech by a famous sheikh calling on Muslim men to marry 4 women in order to occupy Christendom by natural increase. That is part of my worry. So far we ask, how can the West help us as local Christians? We still need to continue to ask this question, but about time that we ask, how can we help you? Because you will need our help. I think that we need to hold on many more meetings, trainings, and there was once the problem of how can we not expand, but how can we keep what we have on hand? My statement is that we cannot keep what we have on hand if we really do not expand.
Thank you very much. I'll go to the back.
I just want to, if I may, I want to follow up Pastor Ibrahim because I'm a living testimony and follow up with his point. Next week I'm traveling to Texas.
That's the Texans clapping, by the way, not the Irish.
But anyway, what I'm trying to point is to point 2 things together in one link as a living testimony for your work and for his comment. That me going there as an Arab Christian from here, going to Texas to help with Muslims, that's something huge. And it might be the same thing in England. So it seems that these days, you guys in the West, you need us. That's what I'm saying. And we need you. So to follow up this partnership, how can you adopt us or help us to be ambassadors on both sides, in the West and the East?
Okay, we'll come.
I'm going to let him answer the other question,
Yeah.
and I will come back to this question. But Rami, I definitely want to answer that. I will just say, though, before I do answer, there's only 2 kinds of people. This is coming from a Texan, remember? Those that are in Texas and those that wish they were. So, Rami, we are glad you're coming.
Okay, I will try to answer this complicated question. I don't think the IMB ever left. The missionaries from the IMB came to serve the Lord and to get the message of the gospel to the people of Israel, the people of Palestine, the people of Jordan, and so forth. Back in the 90s, I don't know when people are keeping up with the stuff, but I know in 97 the paradigm shifted. I remember
we're looking at the unreached people group map. It was reached according to the way they were looking at it, because they had 30 mission agencies in Egypt. When they start looking at people groups, they discover that all the 30 mission groups are working among the Coptic people, and all the unreached people groups are not reached. So all of a sudden, Egypt was not reached anymore. We had the Bija, we had the Nubians, we had the Muslims, and all. And so, to be accountable to God as a mission agency, we have to answer the question that we're trying to challenge us today: is what is it going to take to reach all the peoples of Israel? And so the company, the organization, saw that they needed to shift or become specialty in one area. Instead of giving fish, they decided we want to teach people how to fish in the culture and so forth. I have been working ever since '97, and my task has been to try to challenge local believers to look at it from a different point of view. And so this is from the area of the country. Okay? Now I know it is felt strongly within the conventions, because it was an abandonment. It looked like an abandonment because, just like I try to give the example of the eagle that teaches kids how to fly. There is a time where the kids, they have to feel they are left alone. And to be honest with you, I don't think, for all the IMB folks, I don't think they would be ever more proud than seeing you as local Baptists leading what you're doing right now. I believe you deserve a hand for that. Now, this is not to cover. I know mistakes we do mistakes. We're all humans. And I know also the philosopher, the idea that always when change happens, there's a pendulum swing. You go from one extreme to the other. And I believe the pendulum is swinging back, but we've never left. And I've been, and many people have been, part of my ministry basically, and many of you, by the way, I was asked to give this plug. In October, we'll be having training. We train trainers in this idea. It's not really new ideas, it's going back to basics. It's going back to how the church started. I think with time, we added so much weight that we crippled the process of taking the gospel. So we are going back to basics, okay? So in a way, we never left, but we became specialized. And one more comment, because I think the idea of partnership, I remember discussing with a brother from another country. He says, how do you say you're partners? We have this project, it's gonna cost $100,000, that means you give 50 and I give 50. I said, no, wait a minute, no, that doesn't mean, in partnership, if I'm building a building and I have the sand, I can give sand to be used for the building. And the people who have the metal, the wood, whatever, so I contribute what I have. Partnership doesn't mean that we foot the bill and we'll divide it in half. So we have been partners from over 100 years ago, and we will continue to be partners till the Lord comes back. We just need to be together, adding each one what he has to the partnership, including every one of us as local believers. And together we can make God proud.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to ask Wayne to comment in a moment, but I think there's a big discussion, a big issue here in recent history in our Baptist life, which is about hurt. It's about the sense of a sudden withdrawal, and that's a painful experience, and it's a difficult experience to go through. And it is something I've met throughout the Arab communities I've preached in the different churches. And my guess is that it would be good for a dialogue to take place between the IMB and some of the leaders of the ABC, so that these issues can be brought to a godly conclusion. Because it's as wrong to carry a hurt forever as it is to inflict the hurt on somebody, and they can each bind us spiritually. If we're hurt, we can be damaged, but if we nurse a hurt, we can be damaged. And there's always a need to find spiritual renewal and move on. So I don't want to keep the dialogue on this subject now. I see the need of it, if you'll forgive me as an outsider commenting on it, and I look for the day when there will be a real healing of this particular issue between the IMB and the Arab Baptists. Now, brutally, I'm going to move on from that, and I'd like you to ask Wayne. He was waiting to say something.
I just, one comment, thank you for training and sending Rami as a missionary to Texas. We are grateful for the privilege of partnering, and this is some way of that kind of partnership that I talked about, the mutuality earlier. We need to learn from you how to reach the peoples that are moving to Texas, as well as come beside you and help you as you, in your vision, follow God. And we just say, how can we partner with you? So Rami's a classic example of that, and we welcome him.
And just to pick up the pastor's point here about Islam in the West, believe me, there is no denial of the challenge that we are facing. I'll be truthful, I think sometimes there are stories designed to scare people that are told about Islam taking over the West. I don't see that happening, but I know there is a danger. But the reality is that if ever, in our view, we felt that world mission begins the moment we leave our country, our churches now know that world mission begins for them the moment they step outside their church. In every town and city in the UK today, people from all over the world practicing all kinds of faiths are to be found within 5 minutes of a local church. And the lessons that we have learned and the mistakes that we've made in world mission, we're trying to share those with our churches now because they are engaging these communities. We have people from different parts of the world, all over the world, working in the UK as missionaries. Mission is no longer from the west to the east or from the north to the south. It's from everywhere to everywhere. One of our partners that we have been supporting for the last 10 or 11 years is an Egyptian evangelical believer working amongst Arabs, Muslim Arabs in the west of London and doing a fantastic work. We have just appointed one of our regional team leaders, a great church planter evangelist from India. So mission is changing in its character. It's no longer one direction. It's from everywhere to everywhere. And that would be the experience of all of us.
Thank you, David. And it's an interesting way to bring that back to the scene here in Israel, to remember that the Association of Baptist Churches is no longer purely Arab, if it was ever purely Arab, because it includes Russian-speaking people and Filipino. In fact, Alice is here today from the Filipino congregation in Tel Aviv, a member church of the ABC, and the world comes to Israel. That's one of the most amazing things about this country, isn't it? And it presents a mission challenge. And it is a question I want to ask from my own perspective, coming in as a mission partner to work in Israel, is where actually is the vision? Where do we lift up our eyes from within the Arab context and ask this question: in what way is God calling Arab Baptists in Israel to go into the world internationally and preach the gospel? Maybe this issue is a way of thinking about it. Rani Espagnoli, who just spoke a moment ago, spent a year in the church where I used to be the pastor near London. And I remember going down a particular road in London with Rani one evening. We were visiting, a group of us from the church were visiting a very nice Lebanese restaurant in North London. And walking back, it was really an Arab place. But London is like that. It's just an amazing collection of cultures. And there was a bookstore, a Muslim bookstore, and quite a crowd gathered around it. And I have to say this for Rami: he sailed into that group without a hesitation, captured an audience, and began to explain the gospel to people who had been just selling Muslim literature to a Muslim crowd. And not only did that demonstrate enormous courage and faith, but his own gifting for evangelism, which we know is a remarkable thing, was really on display there. And that's an example of how there is a world dimension open to us here in Israel already. And maybe partnership means crossing the bridge both ways in terms of personnel and resources. I am a merciful man, you know that. I'm a very merciful man. And this session is due to finish at 5:30. But the heart of mercy in me says, you might like to finish a little earlier. So, how about if I do a little summing up to draw things to a close, unless someone has a burning issue that they would like to raise, and that's not a way of putting you off. If you're waiting to say it, now's your chance. Yes.
Maybe I need somebody to translate.
It's being translated.
Okay. No.
Oh, into English?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Rani will do that. Come up to the microphone, Rani, because it doesn't stretch.
اوكي بدي احكي على انا كأم ربيت في محل اللي هو كله محبة وكبرت في المحبة اللي كانت كل الوقت تحوطني منه وانا جيل كثير صغير.
I grew up, I'm going to talk from my perspective as a mother, growing up in a house full of love.
من جيل صغير واحنا مليانين في كل البرامج المسيحية.
Young age, we grew up in Christian literature and programs.
إن كانت في الكنيسة يوم كنت
In church every day and Sunday.
Sunday school, فتح تجربة، اجتماعات، ريجستر، بالكواير.
Choirs.
اوكي. اليوم أنا عندي بنت صغيرة وبطلع بقول شو البرامج المعدلة إلها.
What's the programs dedicated for her age?
كطفلة اللي بحب كتير تكبر أو تنمو في المينيموم إيش أنا أخذت يعني. وإنه هل في برامج مخططين للصغار أكثر إنه يقدر ينمو في بذرة الإيمان وزي ما عم نطلع نقول.
Her question is there any future programs to develop for youth from a future of my children, for example, here in our country?
زي ما حتى statistic اليوم بتقول إنه كثير عم بيسافروا بهاجروا لبيت البلاد يمكن أنا عيني لبرا كمان. ما بديش يكون لإلي ولا بنتي أو يعني أي عيلة بنطلع إنه نقول مستقبل أولادنا صار بالمسيحية بريت البلاد أكثر من ما إحنا عم نتاكل هون.
Exactly, and the statistics showing that a lot of Arab Christians they leave the country and they immigrate. So I don't want, my concern is for my daughter. I don't want her to get into this trouble also and to seek out of this country.
Thank you. If I can speak as part of the leadership of the ABC, we are conscious that the next step is to raise the vision of how the churches can be helped and supported in their own ministries to become more effective and more relevant. And that is the next step, I believe, that the ABC needs to take. This is a subject we need to discuss, and the churches need to discuss and ask what do they want of the ABC in terms of equipping them and training them. Now, also as a pastor of a local church, I would say this: I can see the West coming into Arab culture more and more. Even in the last 10 years that I've visited Israel regularly, I've seen Westernization increase, especially amongst the teenagers. So that I think you are right to identify a very crucial area. What happens to the young people is a crucial question, especially in a culture where evangelism has been done so much in the context of the wider family, that one member of the family wins another member of the family, and it becomes almost a family heritage. So, of course, the pressure on the young people is very great. You have to know, tragically, that in the West, individualism is so rampant that it is now possibly more normal for believers' children not to believe than it is for them to believe. I'm sorry to say it, but that is my observation. after 40 years of ministry in Britain. So it is a very important issue. And thank you very much for reminding us that ABC does need to serve the churches by equipping the churches to be effective in ministry and mission. I'm going to sum up. And I realise that as soon as you say something, it sparks somebody with a question, and somebody will go away disappointed just at the crucial moment. And that always seems to happen in the last 5 minutes of an open debate. So here is what I want to say. I believe that we are identifying 3 areas of partnership. One is what we might call international and strategic, the kind of things which agency to agency can do to bring strategic operations, financial support, or whatever it may be, personnel support for the time being. That strategic international partnership is very much needed still here in Israel, even though it may hurt us to accept it, because we would all like to think that our indigenous personnel and resources are sufficient. I want to encourage you, though, by telling you this, that Christianity is increasingly an international experience. For example, in the college where I've recently been doing research in London, Spurgeon's Baptist College, 2 senior members of staff are Dutch. The need for there to be indigenous leaders is important for cultural reasons, but not for reasons of cultural pride. And this is a lesson the whole international church, I think, is learning increasingly. The second area which I discern in this discussion is the need for theological partnership. The dialogue between cultures to make theology culturally relevant and local requires a theological dialogue that is international. I'm conscious of 3 pressures as I preach in Israel. One is the culture that I come from. The other is the culture into which I have come. And the third is the culture of Jesus Christ, as I call it. That there is something about Christ standing above culture which calls all of us to bow the cultural knee to Jesus Christ. And this requires sometimes deep, difficult, profound theological and biblical thought. And the third area is the ongoing value of local partnerships between churches here in Israel and churches overseas. And to the overseas visitors, I would urge you and encourage you to go back to your local church and persuade them to come to this country and visit and meet their Arab brothers and sisters and see the value of a spiritual and practical partnership. This will bless the Arab church, but it will bless your church richly as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for spending what is sometimes known as the graveyard slot in a conference program, when you've just eaten a large meal. I've been watching with closed eyes, and there weren't too many snores. God bless you.
أنا بطلب من الجميع يضلوا قاعدين، البرنامج بعده ما خلص. في عنا كمان الفيديو 8 و9، فبترجى الجميع يضلوا قاعدين هون. وبعدين في بعض الإعلانات صغيرة، يعني كلها كمان بس 10 دقايق، فبترجى الجميع. We ask everybody to stay here because we still have 2 shots of videos, and after that we have some announcements. Please stay here.
بدأت خدمة الكنيسة المعمدانية المحلية في مدينة الناصرة في سنة 1996 وتستعمل قاعة المدرسة المعمدانية لخدماتها الأسبوعية، وتعقد الكنيسة اجتماعاتها على النحو التالي: اجتماع العبادة الصباحي يوم الأحد من كل أسبوع الساعة 10:30، وتقام خدمة مدرسة أحد يوم الأحد أيضا، اجتماع الصلاة الأسبوعي ودرس الكتاب يوم الأربعاء الساعة 6:30 مساء، اجتماع الشباب يوم الأربعاء الساعة 5 مساء، اجتماع الأزواج مرة في الشهر، اجتماع السيدات مرتين كل شهر. إن رؤية الكنيسة المعمدانية المحلية في الناصرة هي أن تكون نور وملح في بلد المسيح، فتوصل رسالة المسيح بكل الطرق المتاحة، إن كان من خلال الكرازة المباشرة أو من خلال خدمات اجتماعية عامة. بما أن الكنيسة تجتمع في المدرسة المعمدانية في الناصرة، فهي تشترك في الخدمة فيها لطلابها وطاقمها. كثير من أعضاء الكنيسة يقومون بخدمات عديدة في هيئات إنجيلية كمتفرغين ومتطوعين، مثل كلية الناصرة الإنجيلية للاهوت، كلية الجليل للكتاب المقدس، قرية الناصرة، رابطة الطلاب المسيحيين، رابطة الكنائس المعمدانية، دار الكتاب المقدس، فريق ألفا، حياة المحبة وغيرها. ومن هنا تقوم الكنيسة بالتعاون ودعم هذه الخدمات وتتفاعل معهم لتتميم عمل الرب في بلده. تقوم الكنيسة وبفترات متقاربة بطباعة منشورات مسيحية محلية وتوزيعها في مناسبات مختلفة في الناصرة والقضاء. كذلك هناك فريق من الكنيسة يقوم بزيارات منتظمة لمنطقة تل أبيب، حيث تقام خدمات تبشيرية بين اللاجئين السودانيين ولاجئين أفارقة من دول مختلفة، يتم نشر إنجيل المسيح بينهم. تمر الكنيسة حاليا بفترة انتقالية، وقد طلب من القس فيل هيل رعاية الكنيسة وتحضيرها لاستقبال راعي عربي جديد. وقد عدلت الكنيسة دستورها مؤخرا وآليات العمل نظرا لتجربة السنين الماضية، كما أنها ابتدأت بالصلاة والعمل على صقل رؤيتها مجددا، بالإضافة إلى الصلاة لأجل شيوخ إضافيين في الكنيسة. شيوخ الكنيسة هم القس عازر عجاج، الأخ بطرس منصور، والأخ رياض حداد. يعاون الأخ بشارتي القس فيل هيل في خدمته كراعي الكنيسة. تأسست كنيسة كفر ياسيف سنة 1940 إثر انتعاش عامة شرقي الأردن وفلسطين، نتيجة للحدث العجيب للأخت أم سليم قوار في عمان الأردن، والذي حدث في سنة 1933. فقد قدم الأخ الراحل مجيد قعوار من الأردن وبدأ بإيصال رسالة الخلاص من خلال اجتماعات بيتية كانت تعقد في منطقة الجليل ومن ضمنها كفر ياسيف، وطلب الخلاص وقتها الأخ سليم جليس شحاتي. هذا وقد بدأت مجموعة من الشباب بعقد اجتماعات أسبوعية في إحدى الغرف التابعة للكنيسة الإنجيلية الأسقفية، واستمرت هذه الاجتماعات لسنوات عديدة وأطلق عليها اسم اجتماع الإخوة. وانضم إلى هذا الاجتماع مجموعة لا بأس بها من الشبيبة والأزواج، واعتمدها الكثيرين. كانت الخدمات تعقد أيام الجمعة مساء، وبعدها انتقلت إلى أيام الخميس، وخدمة العشاء الرباني كسر الخبز أيام الأحد صباحا. وفي سنوات الستينات تفرغ الأخ سليم شحاتي أبو فوزي للخدمة، وكان يساعده وقتها الأخ يوسف عودي وعيسى سعيد. وانضم بعدها أحد الإخوة الأجانب الأخ وولد، والذي خدم الكنيسة لمدة 10 سنوات. في سنة 1972 شعر الأخ يوسف عودي بالدعوة للخدمة فترك عمله كتاجر وتفرغ هو الآخر للخدمة، وكان يساعدهما الراحل فريد صباح من شف عامر والراحل سليم حلوي والأخ سعد بنا. وفي نفس السنة 1972 اجتاح الرب كفر يسيف خاصة والجليل عامة بانتعاش جارف انضم خلاله للكنيسة عدد كبير من الشباب والشابات خاصة وعدد لا بأس به من الكبار، وأصبح للكنيسة مشاركة فعالة مع عدد كبير من الكنائس في الجليل خاصة الكنائس المعمدانية. وبعد فترة وجيزة انضمت الكنيسة إلى رابطة الكنائس المعمدانية كعضو فعال، مما زاد المشاركة وتبادل المنابر والمؤتمرات المشتركة. في هذه الفترة غيرت الكنيسة اسمها من اجتماع الإخوة إلى كنيسة كفر يسيف المحلية، ومن ثم إلى الكنيسة الإنجيلية المعمدانية. في بداية التسعينات قدم إلى القرية القس أشرف غالي وبدأ المساعدة في الخدمة حتى سنة 1995، وتابع الخدمة بعده القس أندراوس أبو غزالي حتى صيف عام 2001. وفي سنة 2001 حصل تحول في الكنيسة إذ أطاع أحد أعضاء الكنيسة صوت الرب وتفرغ للخدمة تاركا عمله كمدرس في المدرسة الثانوية ومهندس كهربائي. في 1/4/2001 ارتسم القس خالد دلي راعيا للكنيسة المعمدانية في كفر يسيف، واستلم الشباب زمام الأمور في الكنيسة بإرشاد الروح القدس، بعضهم شيوخا وآخرين شمامسة، وما زال الرب يعمل من خلال خادمه الأمين والإخوة العاملين في الكنيسة، وما زال الرب يضم كل فترة إلى الكنيسة الذين يخلصون. في سنة 2006 طور الرب خدمة فريق العبادة في الكنيسة الذي أطلق عليه فريق الرب رايتي، وانطلق ليخدم في كل أرجاء البلاد والكنائس والخدمات التي يدعى إليها. قام الفريق حتى الآن بإصدار CD بعنوان أيام إيليا، وهو اليوم يعمل على إصدار CD آخر بعنوان زيدوا المسيح. كما قامت الكنيسة مؤخرا بتجهيز غرفة خاصة في داخل مبنى الكنيسة لخدمة المشورة بإشراف عدنان وداعد عودي المعينين كشمامسة في الكنيسة لخدمة العائلات من داخل وخارج الكنيسة، حل المشاكل وإعطاء المشورة الروحية لهم. اجتماعات الكنيسة هي كالنحو التالي: الأحد الساعة 10:30 صباحا كسر الخبز ودرس الكتاب. الثلاثاء 10 صباحا اجتماع النساء المتقدمات بالعمر. الثلاثاء الساعة 7 مساء اجتماع الصلاة. الخميس الساعة 7 مساء اجتماع العبادة الرئيسي. الجمعة الساعة 7 مساء تدريب لفريق الترنيم. السبت الساعة 4 مساء مدارس الأحد. السبت الساعة 5 مساء خدمة الأحداث والشباب.